This is Chapter 15, Health Promotion of the Adolescent and Family. So this is the time that's really a transition between childhood and adulthood. It's characterized by rapid physical growth, cognitive change, social changes, where the peer group becomes far more important, and emotional maturity. Like most of our development, it doesn't happen at a consistent rate. There will be times when they make great strides and times when they don't do too well in achieving this maturity. So we generally consider this to begin with the onset of puberty, and depending on the child, that can be anywhere 10 to 12 years old, and then ends when they're have finished growing, somewhere 18 to 20 years old. The biologic changes during this are a result of a whole lot of hormonal activity influenced by the central nervous system, but basically we see those secondary sexual characteristics develop. In girls, we consider puberty delayed if they haven't begun breast development by 13 years, and in boys, we consider puberty delayed if there's no changes to the testes or the scrotum by 14 years. So this is a time of really dramatic increase in size, as well as the changes of the secondary sexual characteristics. So adolescents, they have that growth spurt. They gain about 20 to 25% of their total height during puberty, and most of that happens in a very short period, 24 to 36 month period. Most of that growth in height occurs. Other changes happen. Boys have their voices change. That's the larynx and the vocal cords enlarge, and it makes their voices change. The sebaceous glands become very active, so they develop that oily skin and have trouble with acne. Their hair changes. It gets coarser and darker, thicker, longer. Their muscle tone changes, and all of their internal organs become quite efficient. Their heart is able to beat more volume and stronger. Their respiratories pattern, they're able to breathe deeply. Their metabolic functioning, they're at their best really for most of this is kind of for most of them, this is about the best their body's going to function. So our developmental theorist Erickson says this is their goal, or what they need to do during this stage is develop a sense of identity. And early in adolescence, they get that from a group identity. They just kind of identify with a group. I'm whatever, part of the smart kids group, part of the athletic kids group, part of the whatever. So they develop this identity through the group that they associate with. But it continues on past that group identity, where they're really developing a personal identity. Who am I? What do I believe? What is my life going to be about? They do see themselves as unique and distinct from everyone else, but figuring out exactly what that means is their developmental task here. So as they're trying to do that, there are periods of confusion and depression, times of discouragement as they're struggling to figure out who they are and what their life is about. And their emotions vacillate, partly from hormonal changes and partly this is a tough developmental stage. So sometimes they're very mature and sometimes they are very childlike. Piaget, his theory of cognitive development, says that this is formal operations during this. So they are finally able to think abstractly. They're able to consider the possible. And you probably can remember those first times that you had these really deep philosophical discussions, thinking about things that you'd never been able to consider before. So that's, adolescent. They're able to think beyond the present. They're able to imagine themselves in the future. I want to be a nurse someday, so I'm going to take these science classes, and right, they're able to make a plan and think into the future. They're able to manipulate multiple variables in their mind. Some of this is mathematics, time and distance and speed all contribute to how fast I'm going to get somewhere. But it's not limited just to math. They're able to consider multiple things or look at something from multiple angles. They really understand other people's thoughts and needs and are concerned about that, about others. Kohlberg, for moral development, says that this is the age where they really have internalized a set of moral principles. They do a lot of questioning to get there. They question the moral values of society and how they're relevant and what is really helpful for society and what is just sort of residual from that aren't relevant anymore as the culture changes. They understand later in adolescence, they're able to understand duty and obligation. That is my duty to support my country, to honor my grandparents, anyway, so duty and obligation, and reciprocal rights of others, that I have the right to do whatever I want, but you have the right for me not to interfere with you. So just because I want to drive 80 miles down my block, you have a right to have your children safe and not have people driving that fast. So they're able to kind of balance that societal needs with individual rights. And that ties right in with this concept of justice, and that there is a way, and you should make amends for things you do that are wrong, and that's what part of justice is. Spiritual development, at this stage, their beliefs become much more abstract. If you remember, prior to this, they saw their spiritual understanding was very concrete. And so now they're finally able to think abstractly, and they're able to focus on the principles of what they believe and not just the rituals or the practices that they do. So it's kind of understanding the meaning behind things rather than just going through the motions of it. Some kids at this age will really question the values and beliefs of their family. But again, this is where they're developing that, kind of coming to grips with what they are going to believe and what their spiritual understanding is going to be. And they can understand concepts and analogies and spiritual symbols. They understand what those, the meanings behind them. Social development. The goal is to define one's identity independently of their parents' authority, and that's really hard for both the child and the parents. So there's a lot of ambivalence here. They're intensely social during this age. Their peer group is very important, but there's also intense loneliness as they're trying to figure out who they as a person are. Acceptance from their peers is really important, and media has a huge influence on them, especially our current generation, where they have grown up with, being on social media since they were very young. So here's our peer group. Adolescent sexuality is a big part of their lives. Dating, defining their sexual orientation, sexual experimentation, what they are and aren't going to do, sexually transmitted illnesses and teen pregnancy, sex education and guidance. The problem is they're influenced by the media. Their knowledge comes from their peers, from TV and magazines, and a lot of it is not very good. So they really need factual information, and it needs to be based on their developmental maturity level. But they need to also be safe to ask questions. We need to make sure their parents are not in the room when we ask them about this, or ask them if they have questions, because they're not going to ask questions if their parents are there. They are developing self-concept at this age and body image, and all this sudden growth makes them very awkward and uncomfortable. They're acutely aware of their appearance, and they compare themselves to others all the time, and any little thing that's not perfect seems much bigger than it is, so it's sort of magnified out of proportion. As they're developing the self-concept and seeing themselves as unique and individual, the body image they develop in adolescence usually lasts through their whole life, and if it's negative, that is a struggle through their whole life. So promoting optimal health, they really need 9 hours of sleep per night, and adolescents are not known to sleep that much during the week, and instead will sleep like crazy on the weekends. Exercise and activity. The recommendation is 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity at least 3 times a week. Many of them are very active in sports and things, but not everyone, so we want to encourage that. Nutrition. There is increased nutritional need during this time of rapid growth, but they are easily influenced to either overeat or undereat, and so that they can use a lot of encouragement and education there. Body art, piercing and tattoos. Our book says the risks really are minimal. You do want to make sure it's done correctly and not just done by a friend with a dirty, needle. But the bigger issue is conflicts that it causes with the parents. Sun tanning is quite popular and is not good. So we do want to worry about ultraviolet damage to the skin. And then stress. These kids are under a lot of stress, and ways to manage and reduce their stress. So the biggest issue we have is motor vehicle crashes. This is where kids get serious or fatal injuries. So teaching them to use seat belts, no texting and driving, no drinking and driving, and in general risk-taking behaviors is a problem during the teen years, because they have this sense of being indestructible. It will never happen to me. And that is why they have issues with things like firearms. Sports injuries happen a lot at this age because they do some pretty extreme sports.